Jake Morrison stepped through the massive crystal doors and felt like a mouse walking into a room full of cats. The Galactic Council chamber stretched out before him like a cathedral made of living light and strange metals. 12 different alien species sat in a perfect circle around a floating platform in the center of the room. Each species looked more impossible than the last. Jake was just a regular guy from Ohio who happened to be really good at talking to people and solving problems. That skill had gotten him promoted from small-town mayor to planetary ambassador in less than 10 years. Now he stood in the most important room in the known galaxy, wearing his best Earth-made suit and trying not to look as nervous as he felt. Behind him walked Lisa Hayes in her crisp blue Earth Defense Force uniform. Lisa had fought pirates in the asteroid belt and commanded 3 successful missions to establish mining colonies on distant moons. She was tough as nails and twice as sharp. Roy Baker followed close behind them both. Roy was built like a brick wall and had kept Jake safe through political meetings on Mars and trade negotiations on the Jupiter stations. The last member of their small group was Dr. Amy Collins. Amy was the smartest person Jake had ever met. She could look at any alien creature or technology and figure out how it worked within hours. She carried a small device that beeped and hummed as it collected data about everything around them. The aliens in the chamber were nothing like the movies back on Earth had imagined. The Zephyrians looked like giant praying mantises made of metal and flesh. Their 4 arms moved independently as they typed on floating keyboards made of light. Their compound eyes reflected the chamber's glow like mirrors. Elder Vexthon was the largest of them, and clearly their leader. The Luminari were the strangest things Jake had ever seen. They looked like people made of pure golden light. Sometimes they were solid enough to sit in chairs. Other times they became transparent and floated through the air like ghosts. Counselor Mira kept shifting between solid and energy form as if she could not decide which she preferred. The Nexari looked like living crystals that had somehow learned to walk and talk. They made beautiful ringing sounds when they moved. Their leader, Counselor Jara, was a tall purple crystal that sparkled with inner light. When she spoke, her voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. The Chromagons were huge creatures that looked like someone had carved people out of gray stone. General Throck was 8 feet tall and probably weighed as much as a small car. His eyes glowed with a cold blue light and he never seemed to blink. Every movement he made was precise and mechanical. The strangest of all were the void speakers. They looked like shadows that had come alive. Jake could see through them to the walls behind, but they were definitely there. When they talked, it sounded like voices echoing from the bottom of a deep well. They gave Jake the creeps more than any of the others. There were 7 other species in the chamber, but Jake barely had time to look at them before Elder Vexthon stood up on his biomechanical throne. The alien was 12 feet tall when he stretched, to his full height. His 4 arms spread wide like he was welcoming old friends to a party. "Look, everyone," Vexthon said in perfect English that somehow came out sounding mocking and condescending. The representatives of the little bipeds who still burned dead plants to make their machines work. The chamber filled with sounds that Jake realized was alien laughter. The Nexari made tinkling bell sounds. The void speakers created weird, echoing noises. The Chromagons made grinding sounds like rocks falling down a mountain. The Luminari flickered, between bright and dim like Christmas lights. Jake felt his face get hot, but he kept his expression calm. Lisa moved slightly closer to his left side. Roy's hand drifted toward his sidearm, even though Jake had told him a dozen times that weapons would be useless here. "We are honored to finally meet you," Jake said in his steady, diplomatic voice. "Earth is grateful for this invitation to observe the Galactic Council." This caused another wave of alien laughter. General Throck pounded his massive stone fist on the council table. The sound echoed through the chamber like thunder. "Observe? What makes you think creatures who haven't even learned to live without physical bodies deserve to observe anything?" Counselor Mira shifted into her solid form and floated down from her chair to hover just above Jake's head. Your entire species is trapped in meat suits. You age and die and waste energy eating and sleeping. How primitive. Amy's scanner was, beeping faster now. She leaned close to Jake's ear and whispered so quietly that only he could hear. Something's not right about their energy readings. They're not showing the life signs I would expect from such advanced beings. Jake nodded slightly to show he heard her, but kept his attention on the aliens surrounding them. Vexthon was clearly enjoying himself as he gestured toward a series of floating screens that appeared in the air around the chamber. Let us show you how civilized beings conduct themselves, the Zephyrian leader announced. Perhaps in a few thousand years your species might develop enough intelligence to understand basic concepts like quantum consciousness and harmonic matter manipulation. The screens lit up with images of fantastic alien cities that floated in space without any visible support. Ships that looked more like living creatures than machines flew between planets in formation. Worlds covered in crystal spires reached up toward their stars. Everything looked perfect and beautiful and completely impossible. Your people fight wars over invisible lines drawn on maps, continued Vexthon. You poison your own air and water. You cannot even agree on simple things like sharing resources or governing yourselves peacefully. More screens appeared showing Earth's history. Wars and pollution and poverty played out in embarrassing detail. Jake recognized footage from the recent conflicts in the Middle East colonies and the environmental disasters in the Pacific Federation. Every human weakness and failure was on display for the aliens to see and judge. This is why the Council has decided that humanity should remain quarantined to your single solar system, announced Counselor Jara in her wind chime voice. You are simply too dangerous and primitive to be allowed to spread to other worlds. Other aliens made approving sounds. Jake felt like he was back in high school being laughed at by the popular kids. But this time the stakes were not just his personal dignity. This was about the future of his entire species. We understand your concerns, Jake replied carefully. Perhaps we could discuss ways that humanity might prove itself worthy of consideration for limited membership in galactic civilization. The laughter that followed was so loud and harsh that Jake actually took a step backward. Even the usually silent void speakers were making their disturbing echo sounds. Prove yourselves! Vexathon's 4 arms waved dismissively. What could a species that still uses primitive chemical rockets possibly offer to civilizations that have transcended the basic limitations of physical existence? Jake looked around the chamber at the assembled aliens. Every one of them radiated superiority and confidence. They clearly believed they were dealing with ignorant savages who had somehow stumbled into space travel by accident. But Amy's scanner kept beeping, and Jake was starting to notice small details that did not quite fit with the image of perfect advanced civilizations. There were subtle things in the way they moved and spoke that suggested these aliens might not be quite as superior as they wanted everyone to believe. The next 3 days were the worst of Jake's life. Every morning, the humans were escorted to a different section of the massive space station that housed the Galactic Council. Each day brought new demonstrations of alien superiority designed to make humanity feel small and worthless. On the first day, the Luminari showed off their ability to exist as pure energy. Counselor Mira stood in front of the human delegation and slowly dissolved into golden light. Her body became transparent and then disappeared completely. Only her voice remained floating in the air around them. This is what evolution looks like, her disembodied voice explained. We have transcended the crude limitations of physical matter. We can travel at the speed of light between star systems. We can pass through solid walls. We never age or grow sick or die. The light swirled around the room and reformed into Mira's humanoid shape. She smiled at the humans with obvious pity. Your species is still trapped in biological bodies that require constant feeding and maintenance. You waste a third of your lives unconscious. How inefficient. Lisa clenched her jaw but said nothing. Roy's hands were balled into fists at his sides. Amy kept taking readings with her scanner while pretending to be impressed by the demonstration. Jake maintained his diplomatic smile, even though he felt like he was being lectured by a professor who thought he was stupid. That's certainly an impressive ability. On Earth, we've always believed that physical existence has its own rewards, but we can see the advantages of your approach. The other aliens in the viewing chamber made their various sounds of amusement. It was clear they found Jake's response both polite and pathetically primitive. The second day belonged to the Zephyrians. Elder Vexthon connected his mind to the hive network that linked every member of his species across the galaxy. Suddenly, he began speaking in dozens of different voices as other Zephyrians on distant worlds spoke through him. "I am warrior form Klex on the frontier world of Zarion Prime," came one voice from Vexthon's throat. "I am science cast Thyra in the research stations of the Vega system," came another. "I am builder-type Zorks constructing habitats in the Centauri cluster," said a third. The demonstration went on for an hour. Vexthon became a living communication system connecting minds across impossible distances. Every Zephyrian in the galaxy could instantly share knowledge and coordinate actions through their hive network. "This is true civilization," Vexthon explained when the demonstration ended. "No misunderstandings. No conflicts between individuals. No waste of time and resources due to poor communication. Every member of our species works in perfect harmony toward common goals." General Throck of the Chromagons spoke up from his stone chair. "Impressive as always, Elder Vexthon. Far superior to the chaos of individual minds that plagues primitive species." Jake nodded respectfully. "The efficiency of your system is obvious. Humanity has always struggled with communication and coordination between our different groups and nations." "Struggled and failed," added Counselor Jara with her chiming voice. "Your history shows nothing but warfare between tribes and nations who could not agree on basic principles of resource allocation." Amy leaned over and whispered to Jake during a break in the presentations. "Their neural patterns are strange. The hive mind seems to have eliminated something important in their brain structure. I'm seeing massive gaps in the areas associated with creativity and independent problem-solving." Jake gave her the slightest nod to show he understood. These demonstrations were impressive, but Amy was right that something seemed missing from these supposedly advanced beings. The third day was devoted to the Nexari and their mastery of matter manipulation. Counselor Jara stood before a table, covered with various objects made of metal and stone and organic materials. She began to sing in a high, clear voice that sounded like crystal bells ringing in perfect harmony. As her song continued, the objects on the table began to change. Metal flowed like water and reshaped itself into complex geometric patterns. Stone crumbled into dust and reformed as delicate sculptures. Organic materials grew and twisted into impossible living artworks that pulsed with their own inner light. "We understand the fundamental frequencies that bind matter together," Jara explained as her song ended. "By singing the right harmonies, we can restructure any substance at the molecular level. We have turned dead worlds into gardens of crystal and light." The humans watched in genuine amazement as the Nexari demonstrated their ability to create tools and structures simply by singing to raw materials. It was like watching magic, except Jake knew it had to be based on some kind of advanced science that humanity was centuries away from understanding. "Your species still uses crude mechanical tools to shape matter," observed General Throck. "You heat metal in furnaces and pound it with hammers like cave dwellers. You cut down trees and carve stone with primitive implements." Roy finally spoke, up for the first time since arriving at the station. "Our methods may be basic, but they've served us well. We've built cities and ships and machines that work reliably. This comment caused another round of alien laughter. Vexthon's 4 arms gestured dismissively. Built cities that crumble after a few centuries. Ships that break down constantly and require endless maintenance. Machines that fail at critical moments due to mechanical stress and component fatigue. Your entire technological base is fundamentally flawed, added Counselor Mira as she shifted between solid and energy forms. You rely on moving parts and chemical reactions and electrical currents that are subject to entropy and decay. True technology transcends such limitations. The demonstrations continued with other species showing off abilities that seemed impossible to human understanding. The Void speakers revealed that they existed partially outside normal space-time and could observe events happening simultaneously across multiple star systems. A serpentine species called the Helix could regenerate their bodies completely from just a few cells. The crystalline architects could construct space habitats that grew themselves from blueprints encoded in quantum fields. Each demonstration was followed by detailed explanations of why humanity's approach to similar problems was crude and wasteful and destined for failure. The aliens seemed to take genuine pleasure in pointing out every flaw and limitation of human technology and society. But Amy kept taking readings and making notes. During their private conversations back in their quarters, she shared increasingly disturbing observations with the rest of the team. Their technologies are incredible, but they're all highly specialized, she told Jake and Lisa and Roy on the 3rd night. The Luminari can exist as energy, but they've lost the ability to interact with physical matter in subtle ways. The Zephyrians have perfect communication, but no individual innovation. The Nexari can reshape matter, but only within very specific parameters defined by their harmonic frequencies. Lisa was studying star charts on her tablet computer. I've been looking at their territorial maps. None of these species have expanded their controlled space in over 500 years. For civilizations this advanced, that seems strange. Roy was cleaning his sidearm even though weapons were useless on the station. They keep talking about how perfect and advanced they are, but something feels wrong. In combat, you learn to trust your instincts when the enemy seems too confident. Jake stared out the window at the stars beyond the station. Tomorrow would bring more demonstrations and more humiliation. But his team was right that these perfect alien civilizations seemed to be missing something essential that he could not quite identify. The question was whether they would figure out what that missing piece was before the council made its final decision about humanity's fate. Amy did not sleep that night. While Jake and Lisa and Roy rested in their assigned quarters, she worked feverishly at her portable laboratory setup. Her scanner had been collecting data for 3 days, and the patterns she was discovering made her stomach twist with worry and excitement. The readings made no sense according to everything humanity knew about advanced alien civilizations. These species claimed to have evolved beyond the limitations that held back primitive races like humans. But Amy's instruments told a completely different story. She started with the luminary energy readings. When Counselor Mira transformed from solid matter into pure light, the scanner detected massive energy expenditure, but also something else. The transformation was not natural evolution, as the Luminari claimed. It was artificial technology keeping their consciousness stable in energy form. More disturbing was what happened to that energy over time. Amy's readings showed that the Luminari were slowly losing cohesion every time they shifted between forms. Their energy patterns were degrading like a recording that had been copied too many times. The process that gave them their amazing abilities was also slowly killing them. Amy pulled up the data from the Zephyrian hive mind demonstration. Elder Vexthon's brain patterns during the connection showed something terrifying. The individual consciousness that made him unique as a person was completely suppressed during HiveLink. For those hours, he existed only as a relay node passing information between other minds. But the truly horrifying discovery was in the background neural activity. The parts of Vexthon's brain responsible for creative thinking and independent Problem-solving had physically atrophied from lack of use. The hive mind was not just connecting Zephyrian consciousness. It was gradually erasing individual identity and replacing it with collective programming. The Nexari matter manipulation was equally disturbing when Amy looked deeper into the readings. Counselor Jara's harmonic restructuring of materials worked by imposing artificial quantum frequencies on matter. But the process required the Nexari to maintain those frequencies constantly, or the matter would revert to its natural state. Amy's scanner had detected the energy cost of this maintenance. Every Nexari was spending enormous amounts of mental and physical energy just to keep their creations stable. They had become slaves to their own technology. Their bodies showed signs of severe exhaustion that they were somehow hiding from outside observers. Amy worked through the night, analyzing readings from all 12 species represented on the council. The pattern that emerged was consistent and terrifying. Every single one of these advanced civilizations had gained their amazing abilities by sacrificing something essential about their nature as living beings. The Chromagons had replaced their emotional centers with logic processors, but the surgery had damaged their ability to adapt to new situations. They could solve known problems with perfect efficiency, but became helpless when faced with truly novel challenges their programming had not anticipated. The void speakers were the most disturbing of all. Amy's readings suggested they were not actually alive in any biological sense. They appeared to be uploaded consciousness from a species that had died out centuries ago. They existed only as quantum information patterns maintained by massive computer systems hidden throughout their space stations. As dawn broke over the artificial lighting system of the space station, Amy finally had enough data to brief the rest of the team. She called Jake and Lisa and Roy to an emergency meeting in their secure communication room. "We need to talk right now," Amy told them as they gathered around her portable computer displays. "What I've discovered about these species changes everything we thought we knew about this situation." Jake rubbed his eyes and accepted the coffee that Roy had brought from their food dispensers. "What did you find, Amy? You look like you haven't slept in days." "I haven't slept because what my scanner detected is impossible according to everything we know about biological evolution," Amy began. She activated her displays and showed them brain scan patterns and energy readings and biological data from the past 3 days. "These species are not more advanced than humanity," Amy continued. "They're the remnants of civilizations that evolved themselves into extinction. Every one of their amazing abilities comes at a cost that's slowly killing them as species." Lisa leaned forward to study the data more carefully. "Explain what you mean by evolved into extinction." Amy pointed to the luminary energy readings. "They gave up physical bodies to become beings of pure energy. But the process is irreversible and unstable. They're slowly losing the ability to maintain coherent consciousness. In another few centuries, they'll dissolve completely into random energy patterns." Roy set down his coffee cup with more force than necessary. "What about the others?" "The Zephyrians connected their minds into a hive network that eliminated individuality and creativity," Amy explained. "They haven't developed genuinely new technology in over 1,000 years because their collective consciousness can only optimize existing solutions." Jake studied the brain scan patterns on Amy's screen. "And the Nexari?" "They mastered matter manipulation but became completely dependent on artificial environments to survive," Amy replied. "They can't live on natural worlds anymore. Their bodies require constant technological support to function." Amy brought up more data showing biological readings from each species. "The Chromagons replaced emotions with logic, but lost the ability to adapt to unexpected situations. The void speakers aren't even alive anymore. They're just computer programs pretending to be people." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. These supposedly superior beings who had spent days mocking humanity for being primitive were actually dying civilizations, desperately clinging to technologies that were slowly destroying them. "That's why they need the council structure," Jake realized. None of them can survive independently anymore. They've all specialized themselves into evolutionary dead ends that require the others to fill in their missing capabilities. Lisa was studying the territorial maps on her tablet again. This explains why their space hasn't expanded in centuries. They're not exploring or colonizing new worlds because they can't adapt to environments outside their artificial habitats. Roy stood up and began pacing the small room. So when they look at us, they see everything they gave up to become what they are now. We're still biological. We still have individual minds. We can still adapt and create and survive in natural environments. Amy nodded grimly. We represent the path they chose not to take. We're living proof that advancement doesn't require giving up the essential characteristics that make a species truly alive. Jake felt pieces of a larger puzzle falling into place in his mind. The condescending attitude, the desperate need to prove their superiority, the insistence that humanity was too primitive and dangerous to be allowed into galactic civilization. They're not afraid that we'll contaminate their perfect society, Jake said slowly. They're afraid that we'll show the galaxy what they used to be before they evolved themselves into these artificial states. The final council session was scheduled for that afternoon. The alien representatives would announce their decision about humanity's place in galactic civilization. But now Jake and his team understood they were not dealing with advanced beings judging primitive newcomers. They were facing the remnants of once great civilizations who had traded their essential nature for technological power and were now slowly dying from that bargain. The question was whether Jake could use this knowledge to save his species from being quarantined to Earth's solar system. More importantly, could he find a way to help these dying civilizations rediscover what they had, lost before it was too late for any of them? The final council session began with more ceremony than Jake had seen during his entire visit. Representatives from all 12 species entered the great chamber, wearing what appeared to be their most formal attire. The luminary glowed brighter than usual. The Nexari had shaped themselves into more elaborate crystalline forms. Even the shadowy void speakers seemed more substantial and imposing. Jake walked into the chamber with Lisa at his left side and Roy at his right. Amy followed behind them, carrying her scanner and the data pad containing all of her discoveries from the past 3 days. The human delegation looked small and insignificant compared to the alien grandeur surrounding them. Elder Vexthan rose from his biomechanical throne with all 4 arms spread wide in a gesture of final judgment. His compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights as he prepared to deliver the council's decision about humanity's fate. Representatives of the primitive species known as humanity, Vexthan began in his most formal and condescending tone. The Galactic Council has spent considerable time and effort evaluating your potential for membership in our civilized society. The other alien representatives made various sounds of agreement. Counselor Mira flickered between energy and solid form faster than usual, as if she were excited about what was coming. General Throck sat perfectly still in his stone chair like a statue waiting for the ceremony to conclude. We have observed your crude technologies, Vexthan continued. We have reviewed your violent and chaotic history. We have witnessed your inability to transcend the basic limitations of biological existence. We have noted your failure to develop beyond primitive emotional responses and individual consciousness. Jake felt his jaw tighten, but he maintained his diplomatic expression. Lisa's hand moved slightly closer to her sidearm, even though they all knew weapons would be useless in this situation. Roy stood at attention, like he was facing a military tribunal that was about to announce his court-martial. The chamber fell completely silent, except for the humming of alien life support systems and the subtle energy discharges from various technologies. Every representative of the 12 species focused their attention on Elder Vexthan as he prepared to deliver the council's final verdict. After careful consideration and extensive debate, Vexthan announced with obvious satisfaction, It is the unanimous decision of the Galactic Council that humanity is too primitive and dangerous to be granted any form of membership in galactic civilization. The alien representatives erupted in their various forms of celebration. The Nexari created beautiful chiming harmonies. The Luminari pulsed with golden light. The Chromagons made grinding sounds of approval. Even the usually quiet void speakers whispered their agreement in echoing voices. Furthermore, Vexthon continued when the celebration died down, humanity will be restricted to your home solar system until such time as your species evolves beyond its current limitations. This quarantine is for the protection of civilized worlds throughout the galaxy. Counselor Jara's crystalline form rang like bells as she added her own commentary. Perhaps in 10,000 years your descendants will develop sufficient intelligence and emotional control to be reconsidered for limited observation status. The laughter and approval sounds from the assembled aliens grew louder. They were clearly enjoying this moment of absolute rejection and humiliation of the upstart humans, who had dared to seek membership in their exclusive galactic society. Jake stood quietly through the entire announcement. His expression never changed from calm, diplomatic attention. Lisa and Roy flanked him like honor guards at a funeral. Amy clutched her datapad and waited for whatever would happen next. When the alien celebration finally died down, Jake took a single step forward toward the center of the chamber. His movement was so simple and natural that it somehow commanded attention from every being present. "Before we accept your decision," Jake said in a clear voice that carried easily through the vast space, "I would like to share some observations that my team has made during our visit here." A ripple of confusion passed through the assembled aliens. This was not how rejected species typically responded to council verdicts. Most primitive races begged for reconsideration, or made threats they could not carry out, or simply left in shame and anger. Elder Vexthon's compound eyes narrowed as he studied the human ambassador. What observations could a primitive species possibly make that would be relevant to our decision? Jake smiled for the first time since entering the council chamber. The expression was not bitter or angry or defeated. It was the confident smile of someone who had just figured out the solution to a complex problem. That despite all your technological marvels and claims of superiority, Jake replied calmly, you have managed to accomplish something that I believe is unique in the history of galactic civilization. The chamber became so quiet that Jake could hear his own heartbeat. Even the background humming of life support systems seemed to fade away. Every alien representative was focused completely on the human ambassador and his next words. You have evolved yourselves into extinction, Jake said with quiet certainty. The silence that followed was so complete, it felt like the universe itself had stopped breathing. Not a single alien made a sound or movement. Even the energy beings stopped their constant flickering between states. Jake let the silence stretch for several long seconds before continuing. Each of your species has sacrificed essential aspects of biological existence in pursuit of technological advancement. The result is that you are all slowly dying as living civilizations. General Throck was the first to react. The massive Chromagon began to rise from his chair with mechanical precision. These are lies and primitive speculation, he declared in his emotionless voice. Are they? Jake asked calmly. He gestured toward Amy, who stepped forward with her scanner and datapad. Dr. Collins has been taking detailed readings of your biological and energy signatures for the past 3 days. The data tells a very interesting story. Amy activated her scanner and projected holographic displays of the readings she had collected. Brain patterns and energy signatures and biological markers appeared in the air around the chamber for all to see. The luminary energy forms are degrading with each transformation, Amy explained in her clear scientific voice. Your consciousness patterns show increasing instability over time. Within a few centuries, you will lose the ability to maintain coherent thought. Counselor Mira materialized in solid form so quickly, it looked like she had been slapped. Impossible. Our energy transcendence is the pinnacle of evolution. Amy brought up brain scan patterns from Elder Vexthan's hive mind demonstration. The Zephyrian collective consciousness has eliminated the neural structures responsible for creativity and innovation. Your species has not developed genuinely new technology in over 1,000 Earth years. Vexthan's 4 arms began to tremble with what looked like rage or fear. Our unity is perfect. We have eliminated the chaos of individual thought. You've eliminated the source of progress and adaptation, Jake replied. The Nexari have become dependent on artificial environments to survive. The Chromagons have lost the ability to respond to truly unexpected situations. The Void Speakers are not even biologically alive anymore. Amy's data projections continued showing the evidence of each species' evolutionary dead end. The readings were clear and undeniable. Every one of these supposedly advanced civilizations was slowly dying from the very technologies that made them feel superior to humanity. The alien representatives began making agitated sounds and movements. For the first time since arriving, at the station, Jake saw cracks in their perfect confidence and superiority. The agitated sounds from the alien representatives grew louder as Amy's data projections continued displaying the evidence of their decline. Jake could see fear creeping into their expressions and body language. These beings who had spent days mocking humanity were beginning to understand that their own existence was far more fragile than they had admitted. Elder Vexthan's 4 arms waved frantically as he tried to regain control of the situation. Even if your primitive instruments have detected minor inefficiencies in our evolutionary adaptations, this changes nothing about your species' fundamental inadequacy. Jake stepped closer to the center of the chamber where the floating platform gave him a clear view of all 12 species. His diplomatic mask was gone now. For the first time, the aliens were seeing the full force of human determination and intelligence. Focused on them. Minor inefficiencies? Jake repeated with a laugh that had no humor in it. You're dying. All of you. Your civilizations peaked centuries ago and have been in decline ever since. That's why you haven't expanded your territories. That's why you haven't developed new technologies. That's why you need this council structure to survive. Counselor Mira flickered rapidly between energy and solid form like a light bulb that was about to burn out. We are beings of pure energy. We have transcended death itself. You've transcended life, Jake replied firmly. You exist as degrading quantum patterns maintained by artificial systems. You're not immortal. You're just dying very slowly. Amy added more projections to the holographic display. Population statistics and technological development charts and territorial expansion maps appeared around the chamber. Every single graph showed the same pattern of initial growth, followed by centuries of stagnation and gradual decline. None of your species have produced children in substantial numbers for hundreds of years, Amy explained. The Luminari cannot reproduce in energy form. The Zephyrian hive mind has eliminated the individual relationships necessary for biological reproduction. The Nexari require such controlled environments that natural pregnancy is impossible. General Throck stood to his full, imposing height, but, for the first time since the humans had arrived, he seemed uncertain. Our logic systems indicate that reproductive decline is acceptable when species transcend biological limitations. Your logic systems are wrong, Jake said bluntly. Evolution requires reproduction and adaptation and change. When you eliminate those processes, you eliminate the future. You become living fossils maintained by technology instead of growing civilizations. The Void Speakers began whispering urgently among themselves in their echoing voices. Jake realized they were probably communicating with whatever computer systems maintained their consciousness. The fact that they needed to consult external systems to respond to his arguments proved his point about their artificial nature. Counselor Jara created a complex harmony of crystal tones that sounded beautiful, but also somehow desperate. Our mastery of matter allows us to create perfect worlds and perfect forms. We have eliminated the randomness and waste of natural processes. You've eliminated the source of innovation and growth, Jake countered. Natural processes seem wasteful because they try millions of solutions to find the ones that work. Your perfect systems can only repeat what has already been discovered. Jake walked slowly around the chamber's central platform as he spoke. His voice carried clearly to every alien representative. Lisa and Roy and Amy stayed close behind him, providing silent support. While you were perfecting yourselves into these artificial states, humanity stayed messy, Jake continued. We stayed biological. We kept our individual minds and our emotional responses and our ability to adapt to new situations. We remained alive in every sense of the word. The alien representatives were making increasingly agitated sounds. Several species began talking at once in their various languages and communication methods. Jake could sense panic building among these beings who had seemed so confident just minutes earlier. You think we're primitive because we still live in physical bodies, Jake said, raising his voice to cut through the alien chatter. But our bodies let us explore new worlds and adapt to different environments. You think we're chaotic because we have individual minds, but our individual creativity is what drives innovation and progress. Elder Vexthon tried one more time to reassert his authority. Your emotional responses and biological needs make you unstable and violent. Your history proves this. Jake stopped walking and faced the Zephyrian leader directly. Our emotions and needs keep us connected to life itself. Yes, we make mistakes and fight wars and damage our environment. But we also learn and grow and become better than we were before. That's what living species do. Amy stepped forward with her scanner displaying real-time readings from all the aliens in the chamber. Their stress indicators are off the charts. These revelations are causing systemic breakdowns in their artificial enhancement systems. Jake could see it too. The luminari were flickering more erratically. The Nexari were making discordant sounds instead of their usual harmonies. Even the solid chromagons were showing signs of mechanical strain in their movements. You invited us here to demonstrate your superiority, Jake said, as his voice filled with the full power of human passion and conviction. But what you've actually done is reveal your deepest fear. You're terrified of us because we represent everything you sacrificed in your pursuit of perfection. The chamber erupted in chaos as representatives from all 12 species began shouting or making their equivalent sounds of distress and anger. But Jake continued speaking over the noise. We are what you used to be before you evolved yourselves into these dying artificial states. We are proof that advancement doesn't require giving up the essential characteristics that make a species truly alive. Several of the void speakers flickered and disappeared as if their maintenance systems had failed under the stress of the confrontation. The remaining shadow beings whispered frantically to each other. Counselor Jara's crystalline form began, developing visible cracks as she struggled to process what Jake was telling them. What are you proposing, human? What do you want from us? Jake looked around the chamber at all the representatives of these once great civilizations. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet, but it carried clearly through the space. Nothing, Jake said simply. You've made your decision. You want humanity quarantined to our solar system? We'll respect that choice. The sudden shift in his tone seemed to catch the aliens off guard. They had expected threats or bargaining or desperate pleading for reconsideration. We'll go home to our single-star system and continue being biological and individual and emotional. And alive, Jake continued. We'll keep growing and exploring and creating new solutions to old problems. We'll stay connected to the essential spark that drives all true evolution. Jake turned toward the chamber's exit with his team following behind him. But he paused at the threshold and looked back at the assembled aliens one final time. In a Few centuries when your perfect civilizations have faded into history and the galaxy grows quiet and empty, remember this moment, Jake said with absolute certainty. Remember that you had the chance to embrace life and growth and renewal. Instead, you chose pride and fear and artificial perfection. His final words echoed through the chamber as the human delegation walked away from the most powerful beings in the known galaxy. You got exactly what you deserved.